Good afternoon, and welcome to Breaking Down Blockchain, What Every Healthcare CIO Needs to Know, a webinar tweet chat combo from healthsystemcio.com, sponsored by Impact Advisors. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. My name's Anthony Guerra, and I'm the Editor-in-Chief of healthsystemcio.com, and I will be your moderator today. We are hosting, as I mentioned, a simultaneous tweet chat. It will be hosted by Kate Gamble, our Managing Editor and Director of Social Media. You can participate in a separate browser or on your phone by using the hashtag HSCIOchat, or you can simply view the tweet chat in the Media Viewer panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll also be using the Q&A panel today. You can use that to submit your questions at any time in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, and when you send them in, keep the default set to all panelists. I'll be looking at those and then posing them to our panelists later in the program, but send them in as they occur to you. And you can download the deck by using the URL on your screen. It's at the bottom of some of our slides, and it'll be sent out in the chat box in a few moments. Just so you see how we're going to spend our time today, first we're going to have our featured presentation from Chad Brisendine, VP and CIO at St. Luke's University Health Network. Then we're going to hear from our sponsor, represented by Rob Faix, VP of Technology with Impact Advisors. And then we'll have our Q&A. So without any further delay, we're going to turn it over to our good friend, Chad Brisendine. Chad, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me today. I look forward to educating and having some dialogue and discussion with some Q&A at the end.
Chad?
Yeah, Anthony, I'm here. I'm having just a second on my slide transition. If you could move me to slide 5.
Sure, I can forward them if you like. Let me take the control back. No worries. All right, just say next slide, please, and we'll go forward.
Okay, great. Thanks, Anthony. So just a little bit about this first slide. I mean, I think everyone's heard about blockchain and probably read many things about it, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about our favorite character talking about blockchain, and he says, I think we should build a blockchain. Does he understand what he said, or is it something he saw in a trade magazine ad? What color do you want it? I think mauve is the most usual that we would use for blockchain. So I think just to start out with a little bit of character and fun, I mean, obviously people don't know, even understand what's underneath blockchain and some of the technology, and I hope to educate a little bit about, you know, how blockchain got started, really kind of how it works, what we're really doing at St. Luke's, and obviously answer some of your questions you may have on where you are in your journey around blockchain. Just a couple of snapshots on this slide. The blockchain really got started primarily as a Bitcoin, but blockchain is really the application or the OS layer. So think about it as, you know, your Windows operating system, and then you have applications that layer on top of that. And Bitcoin was really the first one that got started on top of the blockchain. So a lot of things that folks read, they think it's the blockchain, but it's actually an application that's running on top of the blockchain. So what I'm going to try to do is help kind of decipher the difference between where the blockchain lives and kind of what the applications that live on top of them. And really what was innovated was the blockchain, and now what's been trying to be applied by healthcare and financial industries and other places is really the applications that reside on top of them. If you look at the Bloomberg article there, Blythe Masters was pictured on there. She was a former JP Morgan Chase executive that created CEO of Digital Assets Holding Company and raised about $70 million from financial firms to develop blockchain. So there's been obviously a lot of money invested more in the financial sector, although over the last year or so I have been introduced and talking to a number of folks that have begun investing in healthcare related blockchain activity. So if you look on the next slide, kind of what is blockchain? It's really a tamper-proof system, so it's not meant to be hacked. And I know probably some of the questions I'll get is, blockchain's been hacked, and my response to that is blockchain hasn't been hacked. What's been hacked is the applications that ride on top of them. So it's really a tamper-proof system, and if you think of it, it's really a distributed database that has keys and encryption that create these blocks of information that pass between transactions. And I'll kind of explain the difference between a private and a public blockchain on the following slide. But basically, PKI is used, so it's cryptographic keys that are used that have to be shared, and then unencrypted on the other side for you to be able to read what's in the blockchain transaction. And then what happens is multiple transactions are stacked on top of each other, and you kind of see that in the picture on slide 5 that are added together for a blockchain. So even if you take one piece of the blockchain out, you still have the multiple other pieces that have to come together to complete the exact chain. And then at the end of the transaction, obviously, there's a successful transaction and a acknowledgement of the keys, and the data is then transferred. So if you look at, why is there such a great interest in blockchain? Really, a number of things. I won't read all of them on the slide, but the main thing is that there doesn't need to be a third-party intermediate. So we spend a lot of money in other people kind of having to do things like trust and interoperability and sharing of information and auditing data and doing all kinds of things associated with distributed data. And they do that to make sure and kind of validate and trust information. Well, with the blockchain, the way it's set up in a distributed ledger, it does all those things. So it creates transparency, trust, interoperability, and auditability, as well as a high layer of security. So won't read through all the advantages and disadvantages of blockchain, but I want to point out a couple of them. I think the benefits are relatively huge as far as in the kind of reordering of technology and some of the relationships in the healthcare field. And if you look at, what is some of our competing driving forces in healthcare is we need to reduce, cost, right? We're on a big cost pressure curve, and we spend a ton of money with third-party intermediaries doing transaction work, and that costs and drives up the cost of healthcare. Also, we do have a high amount of fraud, and I know there has been some technologies specifically in the security area to help reduce that, but with the work of identity really related to blockchain really helps help work to reduce the fraud related to healthcare as a potential use case. And then if you look at the challenges really, and I think, that's why we probably have a number of people on the call today, is it's evolving blockchain, and there's so many different pieces of blockchain. If you've researched 3D printing or any of these other concepts, you'll see that it's multiple technologies coming together. So, PKI has been out there for a long time, and it's very mature. But when you look at things like smart contracts, not very mature, very early unknown, and people think it's a Word document, and it's not a Word document. So, I think that there's just a lot of lack of understanding of why there's immaturity within some of these technologies. And I think the real thing to remember is that blockchain is programming. And that's what it is. It's development and programming. There's, not this sophisticated application that lives on top of it yet, and that's what's continuing to be established. So how does the blockchain work? Well, there's basically an owner, of the data. There's a digital certificate. It kind of all starts with one node. And then what's happened is each node then has to share on the ledger. So there's this ledger that's created between multiple nodes on a network, and I'll explain kind of on a future slide kind of the difference between private and public, but let's just agree that there's a number of computers. And all those computers have to then submit transactions, and then on that transaction chain, there has to be consensus. So basically, if there's something wrong and the block is unable to be read and verified by one of the components, one of the computers basically on the chain, then it's basically kicked out and it's not allowed to be sended and transacted on the chain. So basically all the peers on the network are responsible for do that, and then they basically execute what's on the blockchain. So basically, there's logic on there that says, this is their certificate, this is what has to get passed on there, and then it's de-encrypted on the other side once there's an agreement that the block hasn't been tampered with and there's no challenges with the block. So, how does the blockchain work? Really, it creates a SHA-256 computation algorithm, basically, and basically creates a key that can't be really tampered with at all. It has a hash value that's created within it, and then there's digital signatures that go along with it, and they can be signed kind of with private keys associated with it. So it's basically a security encryption mechanism built within the chain to help transact, and this is all kind of formed off of the PKI infrastructure. So this is kind of just to talk a little bit about the hashing and how it works, and so you can see that you have kind of multiple transactions, and each of those transactions have a value, and multiple transactions and values can be created to kind of combo into what's a block. So you'll maybe have multiple blocks, and each one of those blocks have hashes within them, and those hashes have values, and then you kind of have timestamps within each one of those. And the challenge with this, and where people think that they can hack the blockchain, is, well, they can only hack, like, let's say, block 11, and to do that, they would have to have, multiple supercomputers working to decrypt these SHA-256 encryption, and they would only be able to do that on one block, and so they wouldn't even be able to get the entire transaction, because one transaction could be 5 blocks, 10 blocks, and as you get into smart contracts, which really has not been fully proven out yet, is the data associated with those could be very large. And today, blockchain really hasn't been scaled for as far as like high, fast transaction with large amounts of data. It's really small blocks with small amounts of data, but many blocks together. And the one thing is that what you're seeing in kind of the last 2 slides is blockchain really works off trust, and the systems together, the computers between each pieces of the block are what really kind of collaborate together to create the trust. And the more that you're kind of validating the encryption, the blocks and everything, the more trust kind of is created on the chain. So kind of 2 different things, and what we've been leaning more towards is more of the private chain versus the public chain. But just basically think of it as the internet in the intranet. So on the internet, kind of it's open, everyone can see it, everyone participates, it's global consensus, it's decentralized applications, and on the intranet, it's kind of more, permission-based. We determine who's on the chain, who's not on the chain. It still operates in the same mechanism where there's trust and validation, but again, it's not open to the public. E.g., if we wanted to do stuff with our identity, we would want people to see like all the transactions of everyone's identity online. We would want to be able to keep that in the back end. So just determining the difference between the 2. Bitcoin, for example, is a public open blockchain, whereas a lot of the work that's being done in the financial sector is really kind of more on the private side. So there's a lot of different applications that are potential use cases in healthcare. There's been a lot of them talked about: interoperability, supporting claims and processing, fraud and abuse, Internet of Things, really around identity, enabling, PHI, as well as patient identification. So I think that there's been, a number of use cases thrown out there. I've been able to talk to a number of folks that are kind of going at different use cases. And in the later side, I'll talk a little bit more about, some of our use cases. So if you kind of look at the players, and I'm not going to really talk about them, but I think it's important to realize that these are multiple technologies that are out there, and you can kind of look at the space that's been created. And again, this was in early January. That's the latest we have of kind of the market and what it looks like. And you can see the folks that are kind of really playing in blockchain and the folks that are really playing more in the identity management world. And the reason for that is really the blockchain is kind of built off of an identity management, and and security kind of framework. So you have a lot of vendors that are kind of in both sides of the sandbox, some that are very focused on blockchain specifically, and some focused on identity that support the blockchain transaction. So if you kind of look at, I'm not going to go through every detail of this, but kind of look at some of the characteristics of the public and private blockchain. On a decentralizing process network, you have increased speed of exchange. On kind of a single organization, improves the reliability. And then if you kind of go down to the distributed ledger, you get increased transparency, increased efficiency, and then you also, when you're collaborating with organizations, you get standard data formats across multiple organizations, kind of improve the auditability between organizations. And then when you do your digital signatures, it really helps kind of identify the customers or the folks that are participating to help approve and validate that those who they are versus going to a central digital certificate authority. And when you really talk about the programming logic, and this is where I think folks get confused, is blockchain is a programming logic. And so a smart contract is a phrase. It's not necessarily a Word document or a DocuSign document that's sitting out there. It's a program that's built. So every single smart contract that you want to build is basically programming logic. So it's not like you can take all your, PDF or Word documents, drop them into a database, and then have the blockchain read it. So I think that's where the big challenges are. And then really the contracting phrase of this is kind of where a lot of the challenges and vulnerabilities are, because as you begin deciphering these smart contracts, if the programming logic doesn't understand them, then the transactions aren't completed properly. So I think the difference between the private and the public blockchain is really the public. You can't really place restrictions on those, versus the private, you can do a lot more restrictions related to who can have access, what can they have access to, and determine if you want to be able to open that up to consumers, for example, or not, and really kind of control it more internally. And I really see that being a lot of its use cases, specifically in the healthcare area. So, kind of what have we done at St. Luke's? For the last, I would say, 6-7 months now, we've had kind of a blockchain specialist working with us to help us understand how to apply this technology. And, I've been learning from him. He comes from the security world, not inside of healthcare, but has been doing work in this area for other organizations, as well as has a background in PKI and security identity management. What we did is we kind of had more of an internal Shark Tank between folks on my team, et cetera, and then began having more discussions with some of the business on how and where we would potentially do this. So we went through a number of use cases, and we kind of talked through, and it was pretty resound on kind of where we ended up landing. So on the next slide, what I wanted to just say is we ended up building kind of a robust project plan on kind of what we wanted to do, with the goal of it getting to a POC. But our primary purpose at this point is educating ourselves, getting really familiar with this, understanding its use cases, which we've kind of done, and then getting us into a prototype mentality to be able to kind of really, test this technology. And our goal behind it is obviously to kind of generate business value. Our perspective is we're probably at a high chance of success just because of the early adoption, but I think that's where we've been really focusing on where in the hype cycle, if you will, is blockchain components, and what can we use that is already re-existing. So, where could we use blockchain for some of the use cases? On the next slide, where would they have, where would we benefit from it? Where could we potentially replace some existing systems? And where do we need more trust, transparency, security, auditability, et cetera? So we kind of used the framework of what blockchain is supposed to benefit, and then looked at our existing systems and processes and said, what's the best benefit? But underneath that, we also said, what are the dependencies of the blockchain to be able to do that, and where have other applications been successful, so that we don't try to go build a smart contract that's never been built before between all of our claims transaction systems, and that's not really technically possible at this stage of the game with the blockchain, or the development of it is too early on. So how do we really take blockchain and then build upon it, almost just like a block would be done? You know, you kind of build one piece, learn from that, and then build another piece. So if we go to the next slide, you can kind of look and see, we looked at kind of medical Internet of Things, and, you know, some of the things that came out is, you know, is the device what it says it is? So if you have a device plugged in, do we actually even know what it is? And this is some of the challenge that we have both internally and externally, you know, with both, you know, kind of biomed equipment as well as, you know, the Internet of Things watches, et cetera. Do we actually even know it is what it says it is, or could it be a hacker, et cetera? So we know we need to kind of improve device integrity, data integrity, and fraud and abuse with these medical Internet of Things. So that was a potential use case we looked at associated with that. We decided kind of not to move forward in that space, although, you know, there are some others that have been looking at that as their primary use case. Another area really was around identity, and, you know, for those who have been working on in healthcare IT for how long I have, we know we have a continued issue with the, you know, MPI, or being able to match identities, and we have systems in place, and we have, you know, aggregators, and then we have a lot of people on the back end cleaning up the mess because we have mismatches, and there's just a huge mess with identity within healthcare. And, you know, obviously, the PKI infrastructure in the security industry is kind of built off of this, so it's a pretty good use case area, and really being able to help identify, create a central registration authority to really help us distribute the, you know, user identity method and validation. And we also know a lot of our other third-party systems and transactions, both internally and externally, use the identity as a core baseline. So it really becomes a really key component of the healthcare transaction, and future applications within blockchain will probably need to sort out some of this identity work as well. And this just kind of shows an example of kind of, you know, identity working with kind of 360 of me, which is basically kind of moving the data between the medical record and a hash authority and other distributed applications that could kind of validate people's identities to create that blockchain mechanism. So we've kind of already chosen our POC, and we're in the process of going through that with our goal of, you know, being able to complete something by the end of the year, really being able to evaluate or move to more prototypes in 2018. But we're, you know, in learning phase with the technology, really trying to understand it and get a better grasp on this. So we've been fortunate enough that our work over the last, you know, 6 months to a year, we've been able to talk to other healthcare organizations as well as external folks, as well as some of those vendors that are listed in there, to really get better educated on this. We've attended a number of sessions, and you know, again, have advisors helping us kind of demystify this technology. And I would by no means say that I'm the blockchain specialist, but I would say that, you know, I've spent some time and understood this technology, and it's very similar to many other technologies that I worked on in the past. And the delta, I think, between it is really that it's you know, taken people out of the transaction, and we really haven't had that with distributed databases and security, and it's really taken distributed databases and security and kind of bringing them together and removing the third parties to better facilitate, you know, kind of the automation of data between multiple parties. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Anthony. I look forward to answering questions at the end.
Very good, Chad. Thanks for that excellent presentation. We've already got some questions in, so we're looking forward to taking them in a few moments. Now we're going to hear from Rob Faix with our sponsor, Impact Advisors. Rob, thanks so much for joining, and thanks for your sponsorship today.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here on behalf of Impact Advisors. This is a great presentation, certainly a very emerging and important topic, I think, that's going to be transformative to our industry. In terms of a little bit of background of Impact Advisors, for those of you that may not be familiar with our firm, we're a professional services firm founded in 2007 offering advisory and implementation services exclusively to the healthcare industry, and have had the privilege of being recognized in multiple categories as a best-in-class organization over the years. If you're interested, our website can be found at impact-advisors.com. And in terms of myself, I've had the opportunity to work in the health IT space as an advisor for the past 18 years, currently Vice President of our technology services, which obviously span a wide variety of infrastructure and technology areas, including information security, disaster planning, and obviously blockchain and emerging technology advisory services. I would invite anybody who's participating in this webinar to feel free to reach out to myself directly or contact our firm through our website. With respect to blockchain technology specifically, I too see this as an emerging opportunity and transformative technology for our industry. As I work with clients across the country, I find these conversations incredibly stimulating and coming most often from the information security perspective or from the enterprise architect perspective, and ultimately filtering up to the radar screen of CIOs. So I applaud the efforts of St. Luke's and also Chad to really take a thought leadership position and challenge the organization to find ways to use this technology in their clinical setting. It is a disruptive technology. There are a number of use cases that are being developed. Chad alluded to some of them. I believe it was on slide 12 of his presentation. I find most of these still being developed in most cases for our industry. And in fact, it was about a year ago today, as a matter of fact, on July 20th, 2016, that healthit.gov issued a challenge nationally for organizations or individuals to think about the practical applications of blockchain in the healthcare environment. There were 15 winners identified and named this past September 2016 for potential use cases, notably focused around the MPI, supply chain management, claims processing, things of that nature. I would certainly suggest if you're passionate about blockchain, a simple Google search will bring up the winners from that event. There are obviously barriers to adoption, and as Chad alluded to, this is something that is done either publicly or privately, depending on the type of strategy that you're pursuing. Widespread acceptance is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges in our industry, particularly from a public-facing perspective. If we're sharing information between and among organizations and even vendors, this is something that we want to really make sure that we're approaching it from a unified messaging perspective going forward. So with that, the challenges are great, but I think the opportunity is even greater to really change the way that the healthcare industry shares critical information in a secure and trusted manner using the framework of blockchain technology going forward. So again, thank you everybody for joining the call on behalf of Impact Advisors, and I will throw it back to you, Anthony, for questions.
Very good, Rob. Thank you for that presentation. Now we've got some time for questions, so as I mentioned, go ahead and send them in the Q&A box and leave the default set to all panelists. So let's get started. First question, and we'll run this by you, Chad, and then Rob, if you have anything to offer, you can feel free to jump in. What is the benefit on a private network of blockchain technology over more traditional systems? Won't those traditional systems still need to be used for trust, since the processing capacity of a private network can't match the capacity of a public network? Chad?
Yeah, so I just think it depends on the use case of what we're specifically talking about, whether the third party is still going to be there. I kind of look at it as more of the applications will probably continue to exist. So for example, if you have a third party application that does claims processing with, your insurer, probably that intermediary that does the scrubbing behind it may not be there, but the transactions between the two will be there. And I don't believe today that, it has a high sophistication of transactions, like blockchain isn't capable of sending out mass amounts of data in a really fast period of time, but over time as the technology changes, it will. But it's really meant to not necessarily remove applications. It's really meant to remove kind of the third-party component within those. So, for example, it's more of a secure transaction layer that allows two parties to communicate at the same layer. So, for example, today, a lot of our transactions don't go directly for our identity management work, don't go between us and many of the other sources that we have. So there's no identity management system between us and many of the other healthcare organizations. So kind of how do you create that? Today we're doing that kind of more towards the traditional approach of, people put in their identities, there's duplicates that created, somebody manages and cleans that up, and then those identities aren't shared. So there is kind of more of a human touch and human factor to the identity management piece.
Okay, Rob, anything to add on that?
Well, the only thing that I would add, I think that identity management is definitely going to be one of the leading opportunities for blockchain technology in healthcare. And the area that most intrigues me as an opportunity, and I wouldn't prescribe to say that I have the answers for this, but as our industry continues to morph and go through a period of mergers and acquisitions, how we share information or consolidate information into an MPI and the value that blockchain may bring to that effort, I think represents a great opportunity.
All right, very good. Next question. Chad quickly touched on when there is a break, then the systems highlight the disjointed nature of the ledgers. What types of break remediation processes have you been seeing in the market that are most effective? Is there an automated way or a phone call?
Yeah, so the blockchain hasn't been tampered. It's been the applications that reside on top of them. So for example, someone will build a financial application that lays on top of the blockchain, and the block isn't actually being the one that's being tampered with. It's the application that resides on top of it. So think about it as, the internet doesn't get hacked. What gets hacked is the organization that's on the other side of it, and it's the software component that lives on that. So to date, there's been a few examples out there. I don't know exactly how they've addressed the matter, but it's typically kind of more of an application programming issue. That's been at least the several that I've seen that are out there.
Rob, anything there?
Today, what's been the three things that I understand have been hacked have been like the wallets, the exchange, and the smart contracts, which are all applications laying on top of the blockchain.
Yeah, that's exactly right. To truly effectively hack a blockchain would require distributed computing power far beyond the capacity of anything that exists today, quite frankly, because you're not just changing it at one location or one node on the network. You truly would need to change it instantaneously across every participating node on that blockchain, which again is distributed, whether it's internally or externally, potentially around the world. The ability to modify the blockchain at its root does not exist. Now, it's potential that based on some of the way that blocks are solved, if you will, and we didn't really deeply dive into that element, that a block may become out of sync with another block. And in that instance, the framework does have self-healing checks that will measure itself against other participating nodes, ultimately arriving at the correct result to ensure the integrity of the blockchain overall relative to one individual node, which may have a discrepancy in its locally cached blockchain series. So there are self-healing elements, but to Chad's point, most often it's going to be the application sitting on top of the framework that is the root cause, not the blockchain itself.
All right, very good. Next question, what steps did you take to introduce blockchain to your board and obtain POC funding? Chad?
Yeah, we don't have to go to our board for POC funding for new technologies. It's as long as it's got some certain criteria. So I approved our blockchain project underneath our approval guidelines of that. And for our future proof of concepts, as we continue to expand, we will have to go for funding. We've already been doing some strategic sessions with a number of our folks, just like we've done on a number of our newer technologies, and we've gotten some pretty good some pretty good perspective on this within our organization as far as trying it, knowing that there, again, is a higher level of risk because of the technology, primarily not at the blockchain layer, but primarily at how do we get these applications to work with the blockchain, how do we get the other folks to agree to work with us on the blockchain. So those are some of the, I think, the challenges with it. We've kind of taken the approach of, there's some trending technologies, 5 that I've kind of said are in 2017 that are super important. This happens to be one of them, and we've agreed to spend some financials on better understanding it for our organization.
Okay, very good. What other industries are more advanced in their adoption of blockchain technologies? Are we leveraging their use cases and lessons learned?
Yeah, securities and financial services, and I would say yes, we are. Some of how I got started in this was actually from talking to folks in the financial industry about what they're doing, and that's what actually me and one of my board members actually did that and focused with them on what they were doing and why they were doing it, and that's how we kind of started our POC here and why we're invested in that area.
Rob, any thoughts on that?
I think the adoption of blockchain technology in healthcare is following many emerging trends. Over the nearly 2 decades that I've been serving this industry now, I've often said that as a healthcare technologist, I have the greatest crystal ball in the world to know where our technology is going. I look to other industries such as the financial and manufacturing or retail industries, and we'll catch up in about 3 to 4 or 5 years. That window, of course, is shrinking, which is a great thing. But I think we're seeing that trend play out. And yes, the financial industry is absolutely the #1 area that we should be looking at for inspiration of how to apply this technology in our industry.
Okay, very good. Next question. In a cryptocurrency scenario, a malicious actor can add blocks if their capacity can match the rest of the network. In the case of a small network, I think this would be much easier. How can we remediate this risk?
Yeah, via having identity management and something to validate that it's a trusted source, and the way to do that would be to have some kind of central authority that would validate these folks' identity, where you have kind of Bitcoin, nobody knows who's transacting what, and I think that's part of the challenge. So I think that's why if you lean more towards a private blockchain, you can kind of control, the access and the validation and the validity of the chain versus having kind of the Wild West.
Rob?
Yeah, and this kind of speaks to the point that I was making just a few minutes ago, that the way that you defeat this is by having more nodes participating in the blockchain itself. The more that you have, and whether it's an internal private or a public blockchain, the less susceptible you become to becoming hacked, whether it's through inserting a block or modifying an existing block. Because again, as soon as you make any change, that hash value for the block modifies not just for the block, but all subsequent blocks, making it very easy to identify and pinpoint exactly where that change occurred. And again, this self-healing capability within the blockchain framework will detect that modification and quickly call it out and self-heal. So part of the way that you defend against this, of course, is in the case of an internal blockchain solution, is good information security practices, of course, but then also having more nodes participating within that practice. You wouldn't want to have a blockchain solution operating on 1 or 2 nodes only. You would want to scale that out as best you can within your organization.
Very good. Next question. Thoughts on a time frame for providers to bring in actual technology and leadership, C-suite positions, and where it sits in the organization, such as CIO, CISO, and CFO. Chad?
Yeah, I don't think we've really thought about where the organizational structure aligns to this. I think what we've done is we've aligned it with our innovation and security organization today as far as the resources that we put, and we're looking at, because of who we are and kind of how we do things, we're looking at it as a collaboration amongst partners. So, you know, our goal with the POC is to really develop a team of folks, both of those being vendors as well as our team, to kind of address this. We have not, you know, we're not going to have a blockchain, chief blockchain specialist or anything like that. We will have folks that understand the technology and help us learn and get educated, and then over time determine if this makes sense for us to kind of build, buy, develop ourselves. You know, those are the opportunities. If we decide to build, we'll include that, and it probably fits, at least for us today, tighter into the security world than anything.
Rob?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to live in the security world for the foreseeable future at this point. You know, I applaud the efforts of St. Luke's and Chad developing this as a formal proof of concept solution. Many of the organizations I see talking about blockchain today, it's very much an infancy type conversation, oftentimes even a skunkworks project or a passion project by a small group of folks within the IT organization that may catch fire and become visible to the leadership and ultimately be adopted by the organization in some form or fashion. But I do think it'll be quite a while before we see a box on the org chart alluding specifically to blockchain in any form or fashion. I think it's going to remain in the information security area as one of many projects.
Okay, very good. Can you explain why a private chain is less secure than a public? Is that something you said, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, the blockchain is the same security on either side. I mean, it's encrypted with SHA-256. I mean, there's the only difference is really the control around who gets access.
Okay, very good. Next question, do you see a timeline for adoption? Will this be something requiring heavy tech investment, and will smaller hospitals be kept out of play for a number of years?
Well, I think in general you have to be smart about how you go about these, you know, proof of concepts. There are a lot of people out there that want to partner and work on things together. So, you know, I would say it's up to the folks that, you know, you've got the vendor list. I recommend, you know, figuring out how you want to tackle this and figure out your approach with it. But, I mean, for us, I don't plan on building a bunch of technology for blockchain. I plan on applying blockchain technology and working with others to help continue to modify their applications of blockchain.
Rob?
Nothing to add. I agree completely with that approach. It's a matter of looking for the practical applications. And again, to go back to the previous question, a private blockchain is not inherently less secure than a public blockchain. I would not agree with that statement. Again, security comes from the inherent framework and the mechanics of how blockchain works, and also the scale with which it is applied. So going back to that point about additional nodes, enhancing the security.
Very good. Next question. For organizations already exchanging HL7 with other organizations, is there a great deal of retooling involved in moving to blockchain transmission of that HL7?
I would answer that correctly by saying we're not far enough along to know that. But on a future presentation, I'll be more than glad to kind of present back on if there's any challenges with that. We're kind of in the early stages of our POC, and as that unfolds, I'll be more than glad to report back.
Rob, any thoughts on that?
Same thing. Great question. The answer truly remains to be seen.
Okay. Next question. Is potential blockchain-based self-sovereign patient identity capability complementary or competitive with the winner of the $1 million Chime Unique Patient ID competition? I can read that again if you need, Chad.
No, I know that there was a patient ID challenge out there that's been associated with that. I can't say that I haven't seen the finalist winner on that, so I'll have to read on that and get back on that question, but I know it could be complementary to that, and I know there's, you know, I've got a lot of perspectives on the patient identity and how to address that within healthcare, and, you know, we're taking our own approach on that particular topic, and I'll do more research on to see if there's overlap or any synergies.
Rob, anything there?
Yeah, there's a lot implied in that question, certainly, and I did happen to see that winner of the Chime challenge. This speaks to the ultimate goal of patient-directed, patient ownership of your medical record and interoperability across not only healthcare organizations but EMRs themselves. There's a number of parties that need to be brought together to truly achieve that vision, and I think that paper calls out the opportunity at hand. Getting there ultimately is going to be a highly collaborative effort across organizations and the underpinning EMRs that are hosting those medical records. Blockchain, I suspect, will play that critical role for interoperability and self-directed self-management of your medical record. But I would be very reserved in saying that that's going to happen anytime in the next 2, 3, 4 years or even beyond. I could be wrong on that, but I would be very surprised given the pace of evolution of our underpinning EMRs.
All right, next question. There are several stories about blockchains that branch and some that have been rolled back. Can you explain how something like that happens to something immutable? So if it's not supposed to change, how does it change? I think that's the question.
So one of the examples was the Ethereum framework and the smart contract, and it was actually the smart contract that was compromised in the DAO and not the blockchain itself.
Okay. Anything there, Rob?
I would need to look at the specifics of that particular branch. There's a lot of reasons why it potentially could occur, so no, I don't at this point.
Okay. Well, they just keep rolling in, and we just have a few more minutes yet. I'm sorry, so we got a better wording on that question, and let me know if there's anything you want to add. There were reports that blockchains have branched due to confusion and some that have been rolled back. How can that happen to something immutable? Does that change your answer at all, Chad? Chad?
Yeah, I can't do that question justice enough at this point. I mean, I think that there are folks that have moved away from that particular blockchain, Ethereum, basically because there's a problem within the applications that reside on top of that. I'm not the specialist to kind of diagnose specifically what that redirect was.
Okay. All right, and just one final...
It has caused instability with Ethereum, but there are other blockchains that have not been tampered with that haven't had challenges with.
Okay, very good. And I've just got to note that Don Tapscott will be the keynote on the last day of the Chime conference, Chime Full Forum, featuring blockchain, and he's the co-author of Blockchain Revolution, how the technology underlying Bitcoin is changing business, money, and the world. So check that out if you're heading to the Chime conference.
I've read his book, and I would also ask Anthony that there are a lot of books out there on blockchain. There's probably a half a dozen out there that are, some are better than others. His is really good.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. So we have a note about Don, and we have a recommendation from Chad. I think that's about it, and I think we're going to wrap. Rob, I just want to give you the final word. Any other comments you want to leave?
But again, this is one of many very exciting technologies that are going to be transformative to the healthcare industry, even disruptive to our industry, which may create a little bit of discomfort and a little bit of uncertainty as we work through the practical use of blockchain. I am very, very excited about the opportunities ahead, and again, would certainly extend the invitation to anyone listening to this webinar to reach out to myself personally or Impact Advisors for continued discussion. I'm very, very passionate about this topic, and I think it's a great time to be discussing this. And again, applaud the efforts of St. Luke's and Chad for being one of the thought leaders and jumping truly in the forefront for finding those ways to practically implement blockchain in a clinical setting.
Very good. Well, we're going to finish up now. When you close out your WebEx window, please take a moment to answer our post-event survey. For those of you with continuing education interest in today's event, if you have the CHIME CHCIO certification, attending our webinars gets you 1 CEU, so let CHIME know you were here. And if you've asked us to do so, we will. If you need a certificate of attendance for another CEU program, you can use the final slide in this deck. You'll receive an email when our archive recording has been posted to our YouTube channel. If you'd like us to produce a webinar on the topic of your choice, you can reach out to Nancy Wilcox from our team. If you want to view our upcoming schedule of events, you can go to our website. Again, I want to thank our speakers, Chad Brisendine and Rob Faix, and our sponsor, Impact Advisors, and I want to thank you, our attendees, for continually participating in our events. So with that, everybody have a wonderful day. Thank you.